are now listening to the War Report Podcast Network.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the College Loop Podcast, episode 242 of the College Loop Podcast. I'm Dylan Larck, A-Boy on Twitter. Here to talk to you today with the latest in Auburn football news and Auburn basketball news as well, because the schedule just got announced for Auburn basketball. But just to get started with Auburn football, Cederian Morgan and Deuce Knight have both earned predictions to Auburn. From On 3, Cederian Morgan is a four-star wide receiver in the class of 2026, labeled by many sites as the number 8 wide receiver in the class of 2026. 24/7 has number 2 wide receiver. And Denarius Gray's already committed to Auburn. Would be a great addition just to add into what's could be a trend of great wide receiver classes that Hugh Freeze is bringing in for the Auburn Tigers. Cederian Morgan, currently listed at 6'4", 210 pounds, out of Benjamin Russell. Benjamin Russell just got done with Malcolm Simmons, who's an absolute freak of an athlete. And now you're looking at another one in Cederian Morgan, who is also looking like he's going to be a freak in nature as well, just coming in at 6'4". Currently, I've seen some. He's predicted to go to some places as in Alabama, and I think Florida and Clemson are also teams that are recruiting him very heavily. But On 3 has predicted him to commit to Auburn. And just when you think recruiting has just like slowed down for a little bit, you get news like this, adding to what could be the number 1 class in the 2026 recruiting cycle, which is outstanding to see that Auburn is. Trying to clinch that number 1 spot, because at this rate, if Auburn continues to pick up guys like Cederian Morgan, like the guys they already have in the 2026 class, you're looking at Auburn going into the 2026 season with that outstanding class coming through. Because I think you very rarely get a team fall off from the number 1 spot after picking up just so much. You have Hezekiah Harris, you have Shadarius Tootle, Jermichael Garrett, Cale Ellis, Denarius Gray, and Wayne Henry. Denarius Gray, I think, was one of the first commits to that class, who was a while back ago. Huge if Auburn can land Cederian Morgan to the class 2026. And as I said earlier, Deuce Knight also earning a prediction to the Auburn Tigers on 3, one of the first ones that we've seen so far. Of course, he's been a hard commit to Notre Dame ever since, I want to say, Big Cat Weekend was around the time where something started the shift into Auburn's direction. Still don't know. I've not heard officially whether or not he was at Big Cat Weekend. I know people still speculate about that, but he is on his way to Auburn on August 31st, and Auburn is right up there with Notre Dame and Ole Miss battling out to see who can grab Deuce Knight. And I think Auburn still has a strong chance. I think Auburn will get Deuce Knight, I think the predictions are going to come in a lot more frequently as the season draws closer. Deuce Knight said he wants to make a decision on either decommitting or flipping. That's like his decision that he is working to making right now. Notre Dame fans have already since given up on the fact that Deuce Knight will not be with this recruiting class. But if Deuce Knight can grab, or if Auburn can grab Deuce Knight, you have a quarterback in your class that will draw the attention of multiple wide receivers. And if Auburn just on a steady cycle of just recruiting high-level talent wide receivers, you get the freeze for this year. Right now, you only have Derek Smith in the class 2025. And then if you can grab Cederian Morgan, and you'd have 2 in the class 2026. So Auburn currently working on, trying to emulate what Nick Saban did in the early days of Alabama, or I guess not the early days of Alabama, but just what he was able to do in terms of steadily getting a lot of talent at the wide receiver position, and just absolutely just year after year after year having one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country. So that'd be huge. It'd be absolutely huge if Auburn could land both those guys. But that does it for the recruiting news. Auburn football, by the way, 9 days away from being on our screens, from being in front of our faces. Currently, the kickoff on the Plains, the Alabama A&M game, has since been sold out of tickets. I'm still going to be in attendance for the game, so if you see me, don't forget to say hello. Why not? But yeah, 9 days away from Auburn football, and I have some bold predictions. I got 3 of them that I think I'm thinking I'm going to be a little right. And of course, if I'm wrong, I'm going to knock on wood. My first one is I think Champ Anthony's will lead the cornerbacks in interceptions. I've said prior that I think Jared Thompson will lead the team in interceptions. Now, kind of going to the corners across the board, I know Champ is a star. He's mostly going to be a cover corner. So I think in front of Kyan Lee, in front of Keontae Scott, in front of J.C. Hart, I think you're going to see Champ Anthony as the guy getting the interceptions for all the Auburn Tigers this year. He's just such an athletic monster from what I remember watching from his film whenever he committed from I'm trying to remember the community college, just blanking on me right now. And then he balled out last year whenever he got the chance to. I think we're going to see a Champ Anthony who is on fire to start off. So I that's my prediction is I think Champ Anthony will lead the cornerbacks in interceptions in 2024. My second one, if you've heard me talking about this freshman class coming up, the 2024 class, you might know of a name that I've talked about extensively in terms of who I think is going to be one of the stars of this class. And I'm not talking about the Freeze Four. Or off the bat, I'm talking about DeMarcus Riddick. I think DeMarcus Riddick is going to earn a spot in this linebacker rotation. He's going to be a household name by the end of the season. I think everyone's going to know who DeMarcus Riddick is just because he's so athletic. I think he is going to be what everyone thought Owen Pappa was going to be for the Auburn Tigers. And that kind of comes from the fact that he has better linebacker coaches. He has better defensive coaches overall than Pappo had. And I think Pappo's talents were wasted while he was at Auburn. So I think DeMarcus Riddick, he's one of my favorite players out of this class. Just what he's able to do, just his height, his playmaking abilities. I think people are going to know DeMarcus Riddick's name by the end of the season. No, I don't think he'll start over Eugene Asante or Austin Keys off the bat, but he's going to be the next guy up by the end of the season whenever they need a break. And then my last one, I think Cam Coleman is going to lead Auburn in receiving touchdowns, but I don't think that he's going to lead Auburn in receiving yards. I think you're looking at Keandre Lambert-Smith. I think you're looking at Robert Lewis. I think you're also looking at Rivaldo Fairweather, guys who could potentially have more yards than Cam Coleman. But I think Cam Coleman, as a red zone threat, I think he's going to earn a lot of his touchdowns on 50-50 balls to the end zone. So I think next year you're looking at Cam Coleman being the number one receiver, as in receiving yards. But with Keandre Lambert-Smith's just veteran and talent that he has and what he was able to do at Penn State, I really think that Keandre Lambert-Smith is going to lead Auburn in receiving yards this year. So Cam Coleman still leading Auburn in a statistical category, just not yards. I think Cam Coleman is still probably the most likely wide receiver to give Auburn their next 1,000-yard receiver. So that's my 3 bold predictions going into 2024 season. We're going to take a little bit of a break. When we get back, we're going to react to Auburn basketball, both men's and women's schedule, because the SEC slate has finally been announced for this upcoming season. So we'll be right back.
Are you tired of having to rummage through just clothes after clothes after clothes, looking for something to wear? Are you tired of your friends making fun of you for your terrible fashion sense? Well, do we have the shirt for you? Go to thewarreport.com, get your laptop out and do it right now. Go to the shop and get your very own Feelin' Loopy t-shirt as well as your college loop hat, and you can get both of them for only $25 each. Plus shipping and handling, of course. But with that, now back to your regular scheduled program.
And of course, that's on thewarreport.com. Go to the shop. First page is the college loop hat, which I'm wearing right now. And the Feelin' Loop t-shirts on the second page. That shirt comes in 5 different colorways. Most comfortable shirt you're ever going to wear in your entire life. And this hat, also one of the most comfortable hats you'll ever wear in your entire life. And that's coming from a certified hat guy. But Auburn basketball SEC slate has finally been finalized. It has taken so long to get to this point, but just to run through the men's schedule, starting off the SEC slate at home against Missouri on January 4th. Then January 7th or 8th, they still have not finalized the midweek games, or at least some of them. So on either January 7th or January 8th, Auburn will travel to Austin, Texas, take on the Texas Longhorns. January 11th, they'll travel to Columbia, South Carolina, take on the Gamecocks. January 14th or the 15th, they take on Mississippi State at home. January 18th, traveling to Athens to take on the Georgia Bulldogs. January 25th, you're bringing in the Tennessee Volunteers, take them on at home. Either January 28th and the 29th, you're traveling to Baton Rouge, take on the LSU Tigers. February 1st, traveling to Oxford, take on Ole Miss. February 4th or the 5th, going back home to take on Oklahoma. February 8th, taking on the Florida Gators at home. February 11th to the 12th, traveling to Nashville, take on Vanderbilt. February 15th, traveling to an airplane hangar to play Alabama. February 18th to the 19th, you're coming back home for the next 3 games, starting off with Arkansas. February 22nd, you're still home against Georgia. February 25th, 26th, taking on Ole Miss at home. Then March 1st, traveling to Lexington and take on Kentucky. March 4th or the 5th, taking on A&M and College Station. And they're rounding out your SEC slate with a home game against Alabama. So, adding to a very tough slate of games in the non-con, you got teams that are projected to be top of the total poll as well, with, Alabama, Tennessee, Ole Miss. Don't know how they'll look this year. South Carolina was on the up and ups last year. And of course, can't forget teams that are going to be probably pretty good as well. Looking at Arkansas after they hired John Calipari. You got Georgia, of course, who is always a tough team under Mike White. But if I had to pick the 3 biggest games of the season, I'm looking at 3 home games. I'm looking at Tennessee, I'm looking at Arkansas, and I'm looking at Alabama. I think those are your 3 biggest games of the season. I think those are your 3 must-win games if you're looking to keep the trajectory of where this team looks like it can go. Again, this roster is absolutely packed. I think it's one of the again, I've said this before. I think this roster is the most prepared to win a championship out of any other Bruce Pearl team that he's had during his time at Auburn. Just the amount of vets on the team is crazy. You have 2 young, talented players in Ja'Kai Howard and Todd Pettiford. Bruce Pearl has actually said earlier this week that he thinks Ja'Kai Howard will be a pro. So you got 2 freshmen with a lot of potential. And, you have a schedule to boot. This is going to be an absolute fun one in terms of just how awesome the season is. We talked about on Tuesday the non-conference schedule and how absolutely crazy it is. And now you're looking at this SEC schedule. Tennessee, always play Tennessee, always play. I'm very interested about the Kentucky game. Playing the game in Lexington, you're going to have the rowdy fans of Lexington, but I don't think you're going to have the Kentucky team of old that people are used to seeing. They definitely got John Calipari leaving. Definitely was not something they were prepared for based on who they hired and what the talent acquisition looked like over the course of the offseason. I think Kentucky's going to be a middle-of-the-pack team, which is crazy to hear just anyone say that. Arkansas is going to be interesting, strictly because with Calipari there, they went absolutely ballistic in the transfer portal. And I think you're going to see Arkansas kind of find some rhythm. But I think in a lot of these games, Auburn has the edge anytime a game is played in Neville Arena. Away games, they're going to be interesting. Of course, Alabama is going to be interesting. I just said Kentucky. Georgia, Auburn always finds a way to absolutely choke in Athens. That's going to be a great test early. That's your 5th SEC game of the season. Ultimately, Auburn has the edge in a lot of these games. Missouri, I think you start off with a great just warm-up game for the SEC. I don't think Missouri is going to be very good next year. Texas, I don't know what Texas is going to look like next year. South Carolina, and then you have South Carolina the third SEC game of the season in Columbia, which would be very interesting. I think that one's going to be very tough. I think you might. Hopefully, you don't get the same. Oh, let me not say it like that because I definitely would love it to. I remember South Carolina absolutely got whooped last time they played Auburn. But if they continue on this trend they were at last year, where they were one of the top teams in the country, I think that game could be very fun. But yeah, super excited for our basketball to be back on our screens in November. We are just a couple months away from that and 9 days away from Auburn football. We are in the midst of soccer season. And if you didn't hear about it last week, they actually took down the top 5 team 4-5. It was like 4-0, I think. I couldn't remember what the exact score was, but absolutely awesome from Auburn soccer. And hopefully this is the year that they do some damage too. Auburn women's basketball got their schedule announced as well. Starting off on January 2nd, they'll be taking on the Ole Miss Rebels in Neville Arena, and then traveling to play Kim Mulkey and a new look LSU Tiger team. And on January 9th, going back home to play Arkansas. January 12th, heading to Lexington to play against Kentucky. January 16th, taking on the Texas Longhorns at home. January 19th, staying at home, take on the Missouri Tigers. January 23rd, traveling to Mississippi State to take on, I don't know why I just said it like that, traveling to play Mississippi State. January 26th, coming back home to play Florida. February 2nd, traveling to Columbia to play the national champion in South Carolina. February 6th, taking on Texas A&M at home. February 10th, taking on Oklahoma in Norman. February 13th, traveling to Knoxville to take on the Tennessee Lady Volunteers. February 16th, coming back home to play against the Vanderbilt Commodores. February 23rd, traveling to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama. 27th, taking on Georgia and Athens. And then coming back home on the last SEC game of the season with Mississippi State at home. I like the home and home of Mississippi State. Coach Jay, of course, has history with Mississippi State, as she was a coach there back when they made it to the Final Four and international, one of the two. So it's a game that I'm looking forward to see this year. I mean, again, I just said Mississippi State. I think you're looking at a very interesting LSU game in Baton Rouge. You got a lot of talent over the course of this offseason for Coach Jay and company. I think the game's going to be very interesting, and you get it. That's going to be a good one early. And I'm finally wanting to see this Auburn team do some damage in the SEC. I think they have the roster that can do it. I also want to see them take down teams that they can beat. I want to see Auburn on the opposite end of tough games not going their way. Of course, Arkansas last year still weighs heavy on me, at least, because that game, that should have been Auburn's game all along. It absolutely was a heartbreaker. But games I'm looking forward to, I mean, A&M, Auburn lost an embarrassing game to them last year. I think this is the year that Auburn can beat a lot of teams that they're not supposed to. Do I think they're going to beat South Carolina? I don't think anyone can beat South Carolina. They're just always going to be stacked. But I think Auburn is making strides to finally putting a dent into some of that score. That game is always going to be one of the games I'm looking forward to watching, just strictly because I love watching. South Carolina is just so good under Don Staley. But games like Texas, games like Ole Miss, Alabama, Georgia, and Arkansas are all going to be games I'm looking forward to watching the most. Mississippi State's always going to be a fun one. The storylines of those games are always going to be awesome. But I'm super excited for this season in particular because I think this is the year. Not that Bo Nix will win the Heisman, but that this is the year that Auburn will finally get a higher seed and actually get into the tournament in terms of not having to play into it. I think that they finally have the talent to get there. I am still shocked that Coach Jay is not kind of an extension. I think that what we've seen is unprecedented for what she has done to the Auburn women's basketball program in such a short time. Super stoked for this year. Super stoked for this year. But this season's gonna be awesome. But with that, this has been that does it for this episode of the College Loop Podcast. I also forgot to mention earlier, I said Bo Nix. So even remember whenever I said this is the year. Bo Nix is going to be the starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos. I forgot to mention that earlier in the show. I forgot to write that down. So big shout out to Bo Nix, for former Auburn quarterback, for getting the starting job at the Denver Broncos. Had a great career ender at Oregon. But with that, this has been the 241st episode of the College Loop Podcast. I'm Dylan Larck, @Boateng on Twitter and on Instagram as well at Dylan Larck at DYLANLARCK. You also have me right here on the College Loop Podcast. We should like, comment, and subscribe. Give me your bold predictions for Auburn football going into the 2024 season, and give me your prediction for where you think, if you think Auburn will still finish number 1 in the class 2026, and give me your prediction for what you think Auburn's record is going to be in the SEC in men's and women's basketball going into this season, where we're probably going to see 2 highly ranked Auburn teams going into March Madness. So that's going to be awesome to see. But of course, don't forget to check out the audio version of the show as well on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Music. And again, all the social media platforms, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, the works of the College Loop. And all that being said, thanks for watching this installment of the College Loop Podcast.